from the samples indicate that there's more dioxin deeper than on the surface. And that should not be the case, even with rains trying to force it down. The way that dioxin does is it spreads out laterally. That's why it's so nasty, right? It doesn't penetrate deep where it's self-contained. So the distribution patterns look as though it was injected in there.
Yeah,
some kind of
a
syringe effect, right?
And that's what I was saying to people. What would it take? I keep waiting. I said, well, I'm going to wait for testing. But, honestly, I told people, I'm not even going to believe the testing, because who's doing the testing, right?
Just like the PCR test up your snout.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So what I've done is to advise people to do the iodine thing, right? Lugol's 2% up to or 5% up to 6 drops a day, and then you're preventing your body from uptaking one halide with another. So even if there is dioxin, you're going to greatly reduce the whole probability that you'll get any. But we don't see any of the effects of that. So it's
not. And the other thing they had, by the way, in the train, they had ethylene glycol, and they had another. What was the other one? There was another hydrocarbon that was not miscible in water. And the ethylene glycol was like, I tell people, if you've ever been in really cold climate, they still use that for de-icing planes. So it goes on the wings, it goes on the ground. But the other one was
antifreeze.
It's antifreeze. Yeah. And it goes onto the grassy knoll after it goes on the plane. I mean, trust me on this. So that's not. The other one though was this hydrocarbon. I can't remember the name of it now. Like something acrylate, I think. But anyway, it does make that kind of slicky rainbow color on the water,
And acrylamide,
but it evaporates. Okay, if it's in the sun, it'll get broken down, and if you let it just go off to the side of the ground, and God's world is wonderful, it just kind of degenerates and degrades in the soil. But if these people are going around and they're kicking it up with their boot in the streams and then saying, "See, no, don't kick it up with your boot. Let it go down, and it'll be gone in a few weeks." It's not long term. So the reason they like dioxin is they claim it's longer term, and it's gonna. It's more of an
even
dioxin. Take your land.
Even that in the presence of UV, it has
breaks down too.
Weeks, right?
Yeah. So how many people, so that stuff also deep in the soil. It might have been from years ago when everybody was bleaching their cloth diapers. People don't realize if you use Clorox, you're producing dioxins. If you burn your garbage, you're producing dioxins, because it's more apt to come from PVC, not vinyl chloride.
Vinyl chloride, right?
It doesn't have that much chloride. It has the term chloride, and so everybody gets all excited. It's a psyop too. It's a chemistry-based psyop. It's a new.
Well, there's the thing. Okay, so they've kept people ignorant. They infiltrated the school systems and tore them all down. They don't teach, basic chemistry, critical thinking, any of these kind of things anymore. Our school system is sort of upended. And as a result, the people don't have critical thinking, so they can be sold this and they can be controlled. Right. I keep coming back to the idea of the Khazarian mafia, wrapped up inside the Jewish population. And from them comes the idea of dominance over all humanity, because the Khazarians believed they were given a special little tag on their DNA that makes them superior. And from that, they were told by the space aliens that supposedly made them into GMOs, that you guys are intermediaries, and you're going to control the planet here while we take off and do other stuff, and you've got to manage all this for when we come back. And that's the basis for Zionism, is these Khazarians that have taken that idea and have pushed all this stuff out into the general population for their own purpose. And they're so small in number that they know they can't control the growing humanity, and it's their goal to whittle us down to a manageable herd. Right.
And isn't it is that you're a anti-Semite or something. We can't name the enemy,
or whatever. Right. And they have these images of the woman with the 2 pistols and the transphobe thing. Oh, you can't be a transphobe, right? And so I instantly come back to it. I'm not afraid of trans people at all. I don't think they should exist. I don't think that they're real. Transgenocide is a stupid idea, and all these people are true victims, and they're victims of their parents and the social order that put Munchausen's by proxy in their head and scrambled them all up. But it all goes back to this guy who was, his name is Lin Biao, and he was Chairman Mao Zedong's right-hand man. He came
I remember him. Yeah.
Yeah, he came into the Chinese Party in 1925, and he hooked up with Mao shortly thereafter. This guy was well, he learned psychological warfare with Mao paying for it. He set out and built a propaganda organization that was more than a propaganda organization, because that organization had psychiatrists, sociologists, and linguists that were analyzing everything and creating a broadcastable, exportable form of Munchausen's by proxy that he understood was that Lin Biao understood was the basis for all psychological warfare that could ever be constructed against anybody. And they analyzed, they systematized it, they changed language, they got into it seriously, and we are now suffering Lin's curse. Okay.
Wow.
And Lin's curse includes trans. He did this in the Cultural Revolution in 1965. So Lin was a true believer, in my opinion, right? I don't buy the. I remember.
Wait a minute. Who are you speaking of now?
Lin.
Oh,
Lin,
he was a true believer. Yeah.
He was a true believer. He was Mao's man. I mean, that was just the case, right? And so Lin had an issue in 1965 because, well, 64, he and Mao first started discussing Mao's waning power, okay, within the CCP and within China. And there was a faction that wanted to reintegrate with the United States and the West in 1966 was what their target aiming date was. In 1965, Lin created the Chinese trans movement and the sexual revolution that swept through the Chinese youth in their social order starting in 1965, coincident with the same year it happening here, right?
I did not realize the trans movement went back that far. 65.
Okay. In 1965, he created it in China.
Wow.
He's this interesting fellow, fascinating. His mental acuity was really sharp relative to persuasion and the alteration of mental states. Okay, this guy was a master at psychological warfare, in spite of the fact that the CCP denigrated him from his end of his life onward and denies he really did anything at all. So in 1966, Mao had launched the Cultural Revolution with Lin as his propaganda guy. Lin came up with Mao's little red book. He came up with everybody memorizing tests on it. He came up with simplified Chinese. He went through and he redefined all the words in Chinese and collected them into these two clumps, North Chinese and Southern Chinese, slight inflection difference, but he changed the definitions and upended the society by upending the language. And then he released the Sexual Revolution, which changed all the mores of the Chinese people. And then Mao and Lin released the Four Olds. So if you have weaponized Munchausen by proxy, you need an enemy. So in a prison camp, it's real easy. The guards pick someone and they're a favorite to that guy. And then the other prisoners, that's their enemy because he's working with the guards, whether he is or not, right? So there's all these psychological tactics that go along with this. And so they made the Four Olds the enemy and then had the Chinese people, the young people, whipped up with all of the sexual frenzy and all of the stuff that they'd initiated and attached it to Mao and brought Mao back to power and extended his reign another 10 years from 1966 to 1976. And it was all Lin Biao's doing. The CCP,
now, didn't they take him out at the end?
Yep, airplane crash. And then they
that's what I thought, that there was suspicious.
Very suspicious, very mysterious. Yeah. First, they blamed it on the US, and then they said he was trying to lead a coup and all this other stuff. But they're tarnishing his reputation as they do those people. But see, they do that if they want to bury you intellectually and deprive the world, so to speak, of what you've been doing, right? Lin was just hugely powerful in the redefinition of the Chinese social order. And yet, if you look anywhere, you don't find this there. So Lin's activities with the destruction of the four olds took out 90% or so of the